The fog hung low over Baker Street, a grey veil that smothered the gas lamp's feeble glow and muffled the clatter of hooves on the cobbles. It was a November evening in 1891, and the air carried the sharp bite of coal smoke and damp wool. Inside 221B, the fire crackled, casting long shadows across the cluttered room where Sherlock Holmes sat, his violin resting on his knee, its strings silent. I, Dr. John Watson, stood by the window, peering into the swirling mist, my thoughts as restless as the weather. Holmes had been in one of his brooding moods all day, his lean frame draped over the armchair, eyes half closed, as if the world held no puzzle worth solving. I knew better than to disturb him in such moments, but the oppressive quiet of our rooms, broken only by the ticking of the mantel clock, weighed heavily. I was about to suggest a pipe to lighten the mood when a sharp rap at the door startled me. Mrs. Hudson entered, her face pale, holding a card. "A lady to see you, Mr. Holmes," she said, her voice low. "She seems in great distress." Holmes's eyes flicked open, sharp and alert. "Show her in, Mrs. Hudson, and pray bring tea. The hour is late, and our guest may need warming." The woman who entered was striking, her presence commanding despite her evident agitation. She was tall, with raven hair pinned beneath a veiled hat, her dark eyes scanning the room with a mixture of caution and resolve. Her dress, though elegant, bore traces of mud at the hem, as if she had walked through London's sodden streets. I placed her at perhaps 30, though her poise suggested a maturity beyond her years. "Mr. Sherlock Holmes?" she asked, her voice steady but edged with urgency. "I am he," Holmes replied, rising with a languid grace. "And this is my colleague, Dr. Watson. Pray, be seated, Mrs. Irene Adler," she said, and I caught my breath. The name was not unknown to me. Holmes, however, showed no flicker of recognition, though I knew he recalled her as keenly as I did. The woman who had once outwitted him in a matter of royal delicacy. She sat, her gloved hands clasped tightly. "I come on a matter of grave importance," she began. "A death at Blackthorn Hall, my late husband's estate near Hampstead. My brother-in-law, Sir Henry Norton, was found dead in his study 2 nights ago. The police call it an accident, but I am certain it was murder." Holmes leaned forward, his fingers steepled. "An accident, you say? Pray elaborate." Mrs. Adler's eyes darkened. "Sir Henry was found at his desk, a pistol beside him, a bullet through his temple. Inspector Lestrade insists he took his own life, citing debts and a quarrel with his son, Charles. But I knew Henry. He was not a man to despair. And there are peculiarities. Holmes's voice was sharp, like a blade catching light. "Describe them precisely." She hesitated, then spoke. "The study was locked from the inside, the key still in the door. The window was latched, and no one could have entered or left. Yet I found a scrap of paper in Henry's hand, a coded note, illegible to me, and the clock on his desk had stopped at precisely midnight, though it was wound daily." I glanced at Holmes, expecting his usual impatience with such details, but his eyes gleamed. "And the household?" he asked. "Who resides at Blackthorn Hall?" "Charles, Henry's son, a reckless young man with a taste for gambling. Miss Eliza Norton, Henry's ward, a quiet girl of 20. The butler, Mr. Grayson, who has served the family for decades. A maid, Clara, and a groundskeeper, Mr. Poole, both recent hires. And myself, though I reside in London and visited only occasionally." Holmes nodded, his mind already turning over the facts like a jeweller inspecting a gem. "You suspect one of them?" "I suspect no one and everyone," she replied. "Henry's death leaves a substantial inheritance. Blackthorn Hall and its contents, including a rumoured artefact, a sapphire said to be cursed. I do not believe in curses, Mr. Holmes, but I believe in greed." "A sapphire?" I interjected, unable to resist. "What curse?" Mrs. Adler's lips tightened. "A family legend. The Blackthorn sapphire, hidden for generations, is said to bring death to its possessor. Henry dismissed it as nonsense, but he was searching for it before he died. I found papers in his study, notes on its possible location." Holmes waved a hand dismissively. "Curses are the refuge of the unimaginative, but a hidden gem. That is motive enough. Tell me, Mrs. Adler, what do you seek from me?" "I want the truth," she said simply. "I want you to uncover who killed Henry and why. The police are blind, and I fear the murderer may strike again." Holmes rose, his silhouette stark against the firelight. "Very well. Watson, pack for a night in the country. We leave for Blackthorn Hall at dawn. Mrs. Adler, I shall require that coded note and any other papers you found. And one more thing. Did you notice anything unusual about the grounds?" She frowned. "The fog was thick, but yes, footprints in the garden, near the study window. They seemed odd. Too small for a man, yet too deliberate for a child." Holmes's smile was faint but unmistakable. "Excellent. We shall see what Blackthorn Hall reveals." As Mrs. Adler departed, her footsteps fading down the stairs, I turned to Holmes. "You suspect something already, don't you?" He picked up his violin, drawing the bow across the strings in a low, mournful note. "I suspect, Watson, that Blackthorn Hall holds more secrets than even Mrs. Adler imagines. A locked room, a stopped clock, a coded note, and footprints that do not belong. There is a pattern here, waiting to be unravelled." The fire sputtered, and the fog pressed closer against the windows. I felt a chill, not from the cold, but from the sense that we were stepping into a web far darker and more intricate than I could yet fathom. Holmes played on, his music a haunting prelude to the mystery that awaited us. The dawn broke grey and cheerless as our hansom rattled through the outskirts of London, the city's clamour fading into the damp silence of the countryside. The fog clung to the earth like a shroud, and as we neared Hampstead, the looming silhouette of Blackthorn Hall emerged from the mist. Its gabled roofs and ivy-choked walls seemed to crouch against the hillside, as if guarding secrets older than the stones themselves. I, Dr. John Watson, felt a prickle of unease, though I attributed it to the chill seeping through my coat. Holmes sat beside me, his sharp profile etched against the cab's window, his eyes scanning the landscape with predatory focus. He had said little since we left Baker Street, clutching the coded note Mrs. Adler had provided. A crumpled scrap of paper with cryptic symbols that defied my attempts to decipher it. His silence was not sullen but purposeful, as if he were already piecing together a puzzle I could not yet see. We alighted at the manor's iron gates, which creaked ominously as a stooped figure. The groundskeeper, Mr. Poole, unlocked them. His weathered face was guarded, his eyes darting to Holmes as if sizing up an intruder. "Mrs. Adler sent word you'd come," he muttered, his voice rough as gravel. "The hall's this way." The path to the manor wound through gardens choked with brambles, their shapes distorted by the fog. I noticed Holmes pause, his gaze fixed on the muddy ground near a yew hedge. "Watson, observe," he said, crouching. There, in the soft earth, were the footprints Mrs. Adler had mentioned. Small, deliberate impressions, too precise for a child's aimless tread. Holmes traced one with a gloved finger, noting its shallow depth. "Curious," he murmured. "These were made with care, perhaps to mislead." We reached the manor's heavy oak door, where the butler, Mr. Grayson, awaited. He was a tall, gaunt man with a face like weathered parchment, his eyes shadowed with fatigue or suspicion. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson." he said, bowing stiffly. "The household is in disarray since Sir Henry's death. I trust you'll be discreet." "Discretion is my profession," Holmes replied, his tone dry. "Pray, show us to the study." The interior of Blackthorn Hall was a labyrinth of dark wood and faded tapestries, the air heavy with the scent of old wax and mildew. Gas lamps flickered, casting uneasy shadows that seemed to writhe across the walls. Grayson led us through a corridor lined with portraits. Stern-faced Nortons, glaring down as if in judgment. I felt the weight of their gaze, and the distant creak of a floorboard somewhere in the house did little to ease my nerves. The study was a large room with high windows, their panes obscured by the fog outside. A massive oak desk dominated the space, its surface cluttered with papers, an inkwell, and a stopped clock. Its hands frozen at midnight, as Mrs. Adler had described. The air held a faint tang of gunpowder, and on the floor, marked by a chalk outline, was the spot where Sir Henry had fallen. The pistol, a Webley revolver, lay on a nearby table, tagged by the police. Holmes moved with the precision of a hunter, his eyes darting from the desk to the locked door, then to the latched window. "Watson, your medical opinion," he said, pointing to the chalk outline. "What do you make of the scene?" I knelt, examining the floor. "The police report said a single shot to the temple, point blank. The angle suggests the gun was held close, consistent with suicide. But I hesitated, recalling Mrs. Adler's certainty. The locked room troubles me. If it was murder, how did the killer escape?" Holmes's lips twitched in a faint smile. "A question worth asking. Now, observe the clock." He lifted it, revealing a faint scratch on its base, as if it had been forcibly stopped. This was no accident of neglect. Someone tampered with it, perhaps to fix the time of death, or to obscure it. He turned to the desk, sifting through papers with gloved hands. Among them was a ledger, detailing Sir Henry's finances. Debts, as Mrs. Adler had mentioned, but also payments to an unknown party, marked only as CR. Holmes tucked the ledger into his coat, then examined the window latch. No signs of tampering, he noted, yet the footprints outside suggest someone approached this window. Grayson, hovering by the door, cleared his throat. "Sir Henry often worked late, sir. He was obsessed with finding the Blackthorn sapphire. He believed it was hidden in this very room." Holmes's eyes narrowed. "And you, Mr. Grayson? Did you share his obsession?" The butler stiffened. "I am a servant, Mr. Holmes. My duty was to Sir Henry, not his fancies." Before Holmes could press further, a young woman appeared in the doorway. Miss Eliza Norton, Sir Henry's ward. She was pale, her auburn hair loosely pinned, her eyes red-rimmed from grief or sleeplessness. "Mr. Holmes," she said, her voice trembling, "I heard you were here. I saw something that night, a shadow in the garden moving toward the study. I thought it was a ghost, but—" "Ghosts do not leave footprints, Miss Norton," Holmes interrupted, his tone gentle but firm. "Describe this shadow." "It was tall-cloaked," she said. "I couldn't see a face. It vanished into the fog." Holmes nodded, his expression unreadable. "Thank you, Miss Norton. Watson, we must examine the garden." Outside, the fog had thickened, swallowing the manor's upper windows. Holmes knelt by the footprints again, measuring their spacing with a tape. "These were made by a woman's shoe," he said, "or a man with unusually small feet. The stride suggests haste, yet the depth indicates caution. A contradiction, Watson." As we returned to the house, a young man stormed into the hall. Charles Norton, Sir Henry's son. His face was flushed, his cravat askew, and his voice carried the slur of recent drink. "So you're the great Sherlock Holmes," he sneered. "Come to poke about in our misery. My father shot himself. There's no mystery here. Holmes regarded him coolly. Your father's debts suggest otherwise, Mr. Norton, as does the coded note in his hand. Care to enlighten us? Charles paled, his bravado faltering. I know nothing of any note. Holmes turned away, dismissing him with a flick of his hand. We shall see. As we retreated to a guest room to plan our next steps, I couldn't shake the oppressive weight of Blackthorn Hall. The stopped clock, the cryptic note, the footprints, and now a shadow in the fog. Each fragment seemed to taunt us, daring Holmes to weave them into sense. He sat by the fire, the coded note in his hand, his eyes distant. What do you make of it, Holmes? I asked. He smiled thinly. I make nothing yet, Watson, but I suspect Blackthorn Hall is a stage, and we have only glimpsed the players. Tomorrow we dig deeper. The fire crackled, and outside the fog pressed against the windows, as if the manor itself were holding its breath. The morning light struggled through the fog that clung to Blackthorn Hall, casting a pallid glow over the manor's weathered stones. I, Dr. John Watson, woke to the distant chime of a clock, its rhythm a stark contrast to the frozen timepiece in Sir Henry's study. The air in our guest room was damp, heavy with the scent of old wood and wax, and I found Holmes already awake, seated at a small table, the coded note from Sir Henry's hand spread before him. His eyes were fixed on the cryptic symbols, his fingers tracing their jagged lines, as if they might yield their secrets to his touch alone. Watson, he said without looking up, your medical bag. Fetch me the magnifying glass. I complied, handing him the lens, and watched as he scrutinized the paper. The note was a small square of parchment, its edges frayed, inscribed with a series of angular marks. Neither letters nor numbers, but something resembling a cipher from an ancient script. Holmes muttered to himself, his voice a low hum, as he jotted notes on a scrap of paper. A substitution cipher, perhaps, he said, but with an irregular pattern. Curious. Before I could press him further, a knock at the door announced Mrs. Adler's arrival. She entered, her face pale but composed, her dark eyes scanning the room. "Mr. Holmes, have you made progress?" she asked, her tone betraying a flicker of hope. Holmes folded the note and slipped it into his pocket. "Progress, Mrs. Adler, is a matter of perspective. The note is a key, but to what lock I cannot yet say. Tell me, did Sir Henry have a habit of writing in code?" She frowned, considering. Not that I knew. Henry was practical, not given to games. But he was secretive about his search for the Blackthorn sapphire. He kept journals, locked in a drawer in his study. Holmes's eyes gleamed. "Journals, you say? We must see them. But first, the grounds. Those footprints demand closer inspection." We ventured into the gardens, where the fog had thinned but still curled around the gnarled trees like ghostly fingers. The air was sharp with the scent of wet earth and decaying leaves, and the crunch of gravel underfoot was the only sound save for the occasional caw of a rook. Holmes led us to the yew hedge near the study window, where the small footprints remained, now slightly blurred by the morning's dew. He knelt, examining the soil with his magnifying glass, his fingers sifting through the dirt. "Observe, Watson," he said, holding up a pinch of earth. "This soil is mixed with ash. Fine grey, not from a hearth but from tobacco. Someone stood here smoking, perhaps watching the study." He pointed to a faint indentation nearby, half hidden by grass. And this another print, larger, partially obscured. 2 visitors, then, or one attempting deception. I glanced at Mrs. Adler, who stood a few paces back, her arms crossed tightly. Could it have been Sir Henry himself? I asked. Holmes shook his head. Sir Henry's boots, as I observed in the hall, are broad and heavy. These are narrow, delicate, likely a woman's as I suspected. The larger print, however, is less distinct. We must identify its owner. Returning to the manor, we were met by Inspector Lestrade, whose arrival was heralded by the clatter of a police carriage. His ferret-like face was set in its usual mix of scepticism and exasperation. "Holmes," he said, tipping his hat, "I might have known you'd be poking about. This is a clear case of suicide. Debts, a quarrel, a locked room. Why complicate it?" Holmes's smile was thin. "Because, Lestrade, simplicity is the refuge of the lazy mind. The stopped clock, the coded note, the footprints, do these strike you as the trappings of a man who simply gave up?" Lestrade snorted. "The clock's a coincidence. The note's gibberish. And footprints? The grounds are trampled daily by servants." "Yet none so deliberate as these," Holmes retorted. "I suggest you examine the study again, Lestrade. You may find your conclusions premature." Grumbling, Lestrade followed us to the study, where Holmes turned his attention to the locked drawer Mrs. Adler had mentioned. With a small tool from his pocket, he deftly picked the lock, revealing a stack of leather-bound journals. Their pages were filled with Sir Henry's meticulous script, notes on the Blackthorn sapphire, its rumoured hiding places, and cryptic references to CR again, the same initials from the ledger. Holmes leafed through the journals, his brow furrowed. Sir Henry was methodical, he said. He cross-referenced estate records, old maps, even family correspondence. He believed the sapphire was hidden in a concealed compartment, possibly within this room. Mrs. Adler's voice was low. He was obsessed. He spent hours tapping walls, measuring floors. I thought it madness. "Madness," Holmes murmured, "or clarity. Watson, assist me." We examined the study's walls, running our hands over the panelling, listening for hollow sounds. I felt a fool, tapping at random. But Holmes moved with purpose, his knuckles rapping in a precise rhythm. Near the fireplace he paused, pressing a panel that gave a faint click. A small compartment sprang open, revealing a velvet pouch. Inside was a single object, a brass key, its head engraved with a thorned crest. "A key," I said, my pulse quickening. "To what?" Holmes held it to the light, his eyes narrowing. "That, Watson, is the question. It does not fit the study door or the window latch. Perhaps a safe, or something less obvious." As we pondered the key, the maid, Clara, entered to clear the tea tray. She was a slight girl, no older than 20, her hands trembling as she gathered the cups. Holmes watched her closely, noting the way her eyes darted to the open compartment. "Clara," he said, his voice soft but commanding, "how long have you served at Blackthorn Hall?" 3 months, sir," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know anything about Sir Henry's death. Yet you seem uneasy." Holmes pressed. "Did you see anyone near the study that night?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "No, sir. Only the fog. It was thick like something alive." Holmes dismissed her with a nod, but his expression told me he was not satisfied. "Nervous," he said quietly, "and lying, perhaps. We shall keep an eye on Clara." As Lestrade departed, muttering about wasted time, Holmes turned to Mrs. Adler. "I must study this key and the journals further. Tonight Watson and I will remain here. I suggest you lock your doors, Mrs. Adler. Blackthorn Hall is not as empty as it seems." The day waned, and the fog thickened once more, pressing against the windows like a living thing. I sat by the fire, the brass key glinting in Holmes's hand, the coded note still a mystery. The manor creaked around us, its shadows deepening, and I could not shake the sense that we were being watched. Not by a ghost, as Miss Norton had feared, but by someone far more tangible and far more dangerous. The night at Blackthorn Hall wrapped us in a silence so profound It seemed the manor itself held its breath. The fog outside had thickened to a near-opaque curtain, muffling the world beyond the windows of our guest room. I, Dr. John Watson, sat by the fire, its flickering light casting restless shadows across the walls, while Sherlock Holmes paced, the brass key from the study clutched in his hand. Its thorned crest glinted as he turned it over, his eyes distant, lost in the labyrinth of his thoughts. "Watson," he said at last, breaking the quiet, "this key is no mere trinket. Its craftsmanship suggests purpose, a lock of significance, perhaps tied to the sapphire itself. We must find its mate." I nodded, though my mind was less on the key than on the oppressive atmosphere of the hall. The creaks of settling wood, the faint drip of water somewhere in the walls, and the occasional gust rattling the panes set my nerves on edge. "Holmes," I ventured, "do you think Clara was hiding something? Her manner seemed evasive." Holmes paused, his silhouette stark against the firelight. "She knows more than she admits, Watson. Her trembling hands, her fleeting glances toward the compartment. Fear, yes, but of what? Guilt or merely suspicion of another? We shall see." Our conversation was cut short by a sudden sound, a low, mournful wail that seemed to rise from the very walls. I froze, my heart pounding, but Holmes's head snapped up, his eyes alight with curiosity. "Fascinating," he murmured. "Not a ghost, Watson, but something equally intriguing. Come." He seized a candle, and we ventured into the corridor, the flame casting a feeble glow against the dark panelling. The air was heavy with the scent of damp stone and old varnish, and the wail came again, fainter now, from the direction of the east wing. We moved silently, Holmes leading with the stealth of a cat, until we reached a narrow staircase descending to the servants' quarters. At the foot of the stairs, we found Clara, her face pale as moonlight, clutching a shawl. "Mr. Holmes," she gasped, her eyes wide. I heard it again, the crying. It's been every night since Sir Henry died." Holmes' voice was calm but firm. "Describe it, Clara, precisely." "It's like a woman weeping," she said, her voice trembling. "It comes from the old cellar beneath the east wing. Mr. Grayson says it's just the wind, but it's too human." Holmes exchanged a glance with me, his expression unreadable. "Show us." Clara led us through a maze of corridors to a heavy door, its iron hinges rusted with age. Beyond it, a stone staircase descended into darkness, the air growing colder with each step. The candle flickered as Holmes held it aloft, revealing a cavernous cellar lined with dusty wine racks and crates. The wail came again, softer, almost a sigh, and I felt a chill that had little to do with the damp. Holmes moved methodically, tapping the walls with a small hammer he produced from his pocket. "No hollow spaces here," he noted, his voice echoing faintly. "But the sound, note its clarity. It suggests a source nearby, perhaps a concealed passage." We searched for nearly an hour, finding nothing but cobwebs and the faint scent of mildew. Yet Holmes's interest did not wane. "The sound is no accident," he said as we ascended. "It may be a distraction or a signal. Clara, who else has access to this cellar?" "Only Mr. Grayson and Mr. Poole," she replied. "The key's kept in the butler's pantry." Holmes nodded, dismissing her with a wave. As we returned to our room, he said, "The cellar warrants further investigation, but not tonight. We must not tip our hand." The next morning we were summoned to the dining room, where the household gathered for breakfast. Charles Norton slouched at the table, his eyes bloodshot, a glass of brandy in hand despite the early hour. Miss Eliza Norton sat opposite, her hands folded tightly, her gaze fixed on her untouched plate. Mr. Grayson moved silently, serving tea with a precision that belied his weary expression, while Mr. Poole lingered near the door, his rough hands clasped behind his back. Mrs. Adler joined us, her presence a quiet command, her eyes meeting Holmes with a question. "Mr. Holmes," she said, "have you found anything to support my suspicions?" Holmes sipped his tea, his manner casual, but his eyes sharp. The footprints, the stopped clock, the coded note, and now a key. These are pieces of a larger design. Sir Henry's death was no suicide, Mrs. Adler. The question is not whether it was murder, but how and by whom. Charles slammed his glass down, drawing all eyes. "This is nonsense. My father was in debt, estranged from me, and obsessed with a cursed gem. He ended it. Why drag us through this?" Holmes regarded him coolly. "Because, Mr. Norton, the evidence disagrees with you. The clock was tampered with. The note suggests a hidden purpose, and the footprints outside the study window were not yours. Or were they?" Charles flushed, his jaw tight. "I was in London that night. Ask anyone at my club." "A convenient alibi," Holmes said, his tone mild but cutting. "We shall verify it." As breakfast ended, Holmes drew me aside. "Watson, I need you to observe Mr. Poole today. His reticence intrigues me. Note his movements, his interactions. Meanwhile, I shall examine the journals further and test the key." I spent the morning shadowing Poole as he worked in the gardens, his hands deft with a spade, but his eyes wary, often glancing toward the manor. Once I caught him near the yew hedge, pausing by the footprints, as if ensuring they remained undisturbed. His behaviour was not overtly suspicious, yet it carried an air of calculation that unsettled me. By midday, Holmes summoned me to the study, where he stood before the fireplace, the brass key in hand. "I have tested it in every lock in this room," he said. "It fits none, but the journals mention a thorned vault, a concealed space, possibly in the cellar, and the coded note. I am close to cracking it. The symbols align with a Polybius square, but with a twist." Before he could elaborate, a scream pierced the air, shrill and panicked. We raced to the source, the library, where Miss Eliza stood, her face ashen, pointing to a book on the floor. Its pages were open to a diagram of Blackthorn Hall, with a red X marked over the cellar. "Someone left this here," she whispered. "It wasn't there this morning." Holmes picked up the book, his eyes narrowing. "A message, Watson, or a warning. The game is deepening, and we are not alone in playing it." The fog pressed closer, and the manor's shadows seemed to pulse with secrets, each one drawing us nearer to the truth, or to danger. The scream from the library lingered in my ears as we stood in Blackthorn Hall's dim corridor, the air thick with the musty scent of old books and the faint tang of wax from flickering gas lamps. I, Dr. John Watson, felt my pulse quicken, not merely from Miss Eliza's distress, but from the growing sense that the manor's secrets were closing in around us. Sherlock Holmes held the book she had found, its pages open to the diagram of the hall, the red X over the cellar glaring like a wound. His eyes, sharp and unyielding, betrayed no surprise, only a quiet intensity that told me he was piecing together another fragment of the puzzle. "Miss Norton," Holmes said, his voice calm but commanding. "You are certain this book was not marked this morning?" Eliza nodded, her hands trembling as she clutched her shawl. "I was reading in the library before breakfast. That X wasn't there. Someone must have placed it after." Holmes closed the book with a snap, his gaze sweeping the room. "A deliberate act, Watson. Not a warning, but an invitation. Someone wishes us to investigate the cellar further. Very well. We shall oblige." We returned to the study, where Holmes resumed his examination of Sir Henry's journals. his fingers flipping through pages with a speed that left me dizzy. I watched, half expecting him to unravel the coded notes mystery then and there. But he paused, holding up a page. "Here," he said, pointing to a sketch of a thorned crest, identical to the one on the brass key. Sir Henry believed the thorned vault was hidden beneath the east wing, accessible only by this key. The cellar, Watson, is our next step. The thought of descending into that dank, echoing space again set my nerves on edge. But I followed Holmes as he gathered his tools. A lantern, a measuring tape and a small pry bar. Mrs. Adler joined us, her face pale but resolute. "If there's a vault," she said, "Henry would have guarded it fiercely. He spoke of it only in passing, as if afraid to tempt fate." The cellar door creaked as we descended, the lantern casting jagged shadows across the stone walls. The air was colder now, heavy with the scent of earth and something sharper, perhaps the faint metallic tang of rust. The mournful wail we had heard the previous night was absent, but the silence felt no less oppressive. Holmes moved with purpose, his lantern illuminating the wine racks and crates we had searched before. He tapped the walls again, his ear pressed close, listening for any change in tone. "Watson," he said, pausing near a corner where the stone seemed smoother, almost polished. "Observe the masonry here. It's newer than the rest, less weathered. And this," he pointed to a faint seam, barely visible in the dim light. "A concealed door, perhaps." He pressed the brass key against the seam, but there was no lock. Instead he ran his fingers along the wall, searching for a mechanism. After a moment he paused, his hand resting on a stone that protruded slightly. With a gentle push it sank inward, and a low grinding sound echoed through the cellar. A section of the wall slid aside, revealing a narrow passage, its air stale and heavy with dust. Mrs. Adler gasped, and I felt my own breath catch. Holmes, undeterred, stepped forward, his lantern illuminating a small chamber. At its centre was a stone pedestal, and atop it a locked iron box, its surface etched with the same thorned crest as the key. Holmes inserted the key, and with a soft click the box opened, revealing a velvet-lined interior. Empty. "Empty?" I exclaimed, unable to hide my disappointment. "The sapphire is not here," Holmes finished, his tone unperturbed. "But note the box's interior. The velvet is indented, as if something heavy rested there recently. The sapphire was removed, perhaps within days." Mrs. Adler's voice was tight. "Then someone in this house has it, or knows where it is." Holmes nodded, closing the box. "Precisely. And the red X in the book suggests they wanted us to find this empty vault. A taunt, or a misdirection." As we emerged from the passage, a shadow moved at the cellar's edge, fleeting but unmistakable. I drew my revolver, my heart pounding, but Holmes raised a hand. "Steady, Watson. Whoever it was is gone, for now." We returned to the main house, where the household was gathering for luncheon. Charles Norton was absent, but Miss Eliza, Mr. Grayson, and Mr. Poole sat in uneasy silence, their eyes flickering toward us as we entered. Clara, the maid, served soup with shaking hands, her gaze fixed on the floor. I caught Holmes watching her, his expression unreadable, and recalled his earlier suspicion. "Mr. Holmes," Eliza ventured, her voice soft, "have you found anything new?" Holmes smiled faintly, stirring his soup. "A great deal, Miss Norton. Tell me, have you noticed anyone in the household acting strangely since Sir Henry's death?" She hesitated, glancing at Grayson, who remained impassive. "Charles has been erratic, drinking more, staying out late. And Mr. Poole, he's been in the gardens at odd hours, digging near the yew hedge." Poole's head snapped up, his face darkening. I'm tending the grounds, miss. Nothing more." Holmes's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing, turning instead to Grayson. "And you, sir? Have you heard the cellar's weeping sound recently?" Grayson's spoon paused mid-air. "Not since the night Sir Henry died. It's the wind, as I told Clara. Old houses make queer noises." "Indeed," Holmes said, his tone deceptively mild. "Yet this house seems to speak louder than most." After luncheon, Holmes drew me aside. "Watson, the empty vault changes everything. The sapphire is the key to Sir Henry's murder, but its absence suggests a deeper game. I have decoded part of the note. It references CR and a meeting at midnight. We must watch the household tonight. Someone will move, and we shall be ready." As evening fell, the fog thickened, swallowing the manor in a grey haze. I sat by the window, my revolver at hand, listening to the creak of the house and the distant drip of water. Holmes sat opposite, his violin resting on his knee, its strings silent. The air was heavy with anticipation, and I could not shake the feeling that Blackthorn Hall was watching us, its secrets coiled like a snake, ready to strike. The night at Blackthorn Hall deepened, the fog outside so dense it seemed to press against the windows like a living thing, muffling even the faint ticking of the clock in our guest room. I, Dr. John Watson, sat by the fire, my revolver resting on the table beside me, its cold weight a small comfort against the manor's oppressive air. The scent of damp wood and coal smoke lingered, mingling with the faint mustiness of old tapestries. Sherlock Holmes stood by the window, his silhouette sharp against the dim glow of a single gas lamp, his eyes fixed on the darkness beyond. "Watson," he said, his voice low, "tonight we observe. The coded note mentions a meeting at midnight, and the empty vault suggests someone in this house is moving pieces we cannot yet see. Stay alert." I nodded, though my nerves were taut. The events of the day, the red X in the book, the thorned vault, the empty iron box, had woven a web of suspicion around the household. Clara's trembling hands, Poole's secretive digging, Charles's evasions, and even Grayson's stoic reserve all pointed to hidden motives. Yet Holmes, as ever, seemed to see beyond the chaos, his mind a razor slicing through the fog of uncertainty. We had resolved to keep watch from the corridor near the study, where the locked room and its mysteries still held sway. Holmes extinguished the lamp, and we slipped into the darkened hallway, our footsteps muffled by the thick runner. The manor was silent save for the occasional creak of settling beams, but each sound set my heart racing. Holmes, by contrast, moved with the quiet assurance of a predator, his lantern unlit but ready at his side. We positioned ourselves in an alcove opposite the study door, where shadows cloaked us. The air was heavy with the scent of polished wood and the faint, acrid trace of gunpowder that still lingered from Sir Henry's death. Holmes's eyes gleamed in the dark, fixed on the door, as the distant chime of a clock marked 11. "Patience, Watson," he whispered. "The players will reveal themselves." As midnight approached, a faint sound broke the silence. A soft scrape, like a shoe on stone, coming from the direction of the east wing. Holmes's hand tightened on my arm, signalling silence. A figure emerged from the gloom, moving with cautious steps toward the study. The dim light caught the outline of a cloak, its hood obscuring the face, but the slight build suggested a woman. My mind leapt to Clara, or Miss Eliza, but Holmes's grip held me still. The figure paused at the study door, producing a key that glinted faintly. With a soft click, the door opened, and the figure slipped inside. Holmes waited a heartbeat, then motioned for me to follow. We crossed the corridor silently, entering the study just as the figure lit a small candle. revealing Clara's pale face, her eyes wide with fear or determination. "Miss Clara," Holmes said, his voice cutting through the stillness like a blade. "What brings you to a locked room at midnight?" She gasped, nearly dropping the candle, her hands trembling as she clutched a small bundle of papers. "Mr. Holmes, I wasn't stealing. I swear it. I came to find something Sir Henry hid. He told me to keep it secret." Holmes stepped forward, his gaze unrelenting. "What did he tell you precisely? And why now?" Clara's voice quavered. "He said if anything happened to him, I was to find his private ledger, notes he kept separate from the journals. He said they'd prove who was after the sapphire. I was afraid to come before, with everyone watching." Holmes took the papers from her trembling hands, his eyes scanning them swiftly. They were a series of hurried notes, written in Sir Henry's hand, detailing payments to CR and references to the shadow in the garden. One line stood out. "CR knows the vault's secret. Trust no one. These are significant," Holmes said, tucking the papers into his coat. "But your presence here, Clara, raises questions. Why did Sir Henry entrust this to a maid of 3 months?" She looked down, her cheeks flushing. I was more to him than a maid. He confided in me, said I reminded him of his late daughter. I didn't want to betray his trust." Holmes's expression softened, but only slightly. "You will speak of this to no one. Return to your quarters and say nothing of our meeting." As Clara fled, her footsteps fading into the dark, I turned to Holmes. "Do you believe her?" "Partially," he replied, his voice low. "Her story explains the papers, but not her fear. She knows more than she admits, or she fears someone who does. These notes confirm CR is central to this affair. We must identify them." We returned to our vigil, but the night yielded no further visitors. At dawn, we retreated to our room, where Holmes spread the new papers beside the coded note. "The cipher is nearly cracked," he said, tracing the symbols. "It uses a Polybius square with a keyword, likely thorn. The note confirms a meeting with CR at midnight, the night Sir Henry died. But the stopped clock suggests the meeting never occurred, or was interrupted." Before I could respond, a sharp knock announced Mr. Grayson, his face graver than usual. "Mr. Holmes, there's been an incident. Mr. Poole was found unconscious in the garden, near the yew hedge. A blow to the head, it seems." We hurried to the garden, where Poole lay on the dew-soaked grass, a trickle of blood at his temple. I knelt, checking his pulse. "Steady, but weak." "He's alive," I said, "but he needs care. A blunt object, likely struck from behind." Holmes examined the ground, his eyes narrowing. "No new footprints, but the ash is here again. Tobacco, the same as before. Someone was watching or waiting." He straightened, his gaze sweeping the fog-shrouded hedge. "This attack was no accident, Watson. Poole saw something, or someone fears he did." As we carried Poole to the house, the manor's shadows seemed to deepen, each creak and whisper a reminder of the unseen hand guiding this deadly game. Holmes's face was grim, his mind racing, and I knew we were drawing closer to the truth, or to a trap. The fog that clung to Blackthorn Hall seemed to thicken with each passing hour, its grey tendrils curling around the manor like a spectral embrace. I, Dr. John Watson, stood in the damp garden where Mr. Poole had been found, the morning air sharp with the scent of wet earth, and the faint, acrid trace of tobacco ash. The groundskeeper lay in a guest room now, under my care. His head bandaged, but his condition stable. The blow to his temple, I judged, was meant to stun, not kill. A calculated act, as Sherlock Holmes had noted with his usual piercing clarity. Holmes knelt by the yew hedge, his magnifying glass hovering over the ground where Poole had fallen. The footprints we had observed earlier, the small, deliberate ones, were now joined by a faint scuff mark, as if someone had dragged their heel in haste. "Watson," he said, his voice low, "the ash is here again, concentrated near this mark. Our assailants smoked while waiting, a habit that betrays them. Note the texture, fine, with a hint of sweetness. Virginia tobacco, likely a gentleman's blend." I frowned, my mind struggling to keep pace. "But who, Holmes? Charles smokes, I've seen him with a pipe. And Grayson, his hands often smell of tobacco." Holmes rose, brushing soil from his coat. "Both are possibilities, but the ash alone is not enough. We must follow the trail it leaves." He turned toward the manor, his eyes narrowing. Poole's attack suggests he saw something, or was seen as a threat. We must question him when he wakes, inside. The household was gathered in the drawing room, their faces a mix of fear and suspicion. Mrs. Adler stood by the window, her dark eyes scanning the fog, as if expecting answers to emerge from it. Miss Eliza sat with her hands clasped, her gaze flickering nervously toward Charles, who slouched in a chair, his face pale and his fingers drumming restlessly. Mr. Grayson moved silently, pouring tea with a steadiness that seemed forced, while Clara lingered near the door, her eyes red-rimmed, as if she had been crying. Holmes wasted no time. "Mr. Grayson," he said, his tone deceptively mild, "where were you last night after our encounter in the cellar?" The butler's face remained impassive. "In my quarters, sir, preparing the staff schedule. I retired at 11 and heard nothing until Clara's scream this morning." Holmes nodded, turning to Charles. "And you, Mr. Norton, your club in London seems a distant alibi for last night's events." Charles bristled, his voice sharp. "I was here in my room drinking alone. I didn't touch Poole, if that's what you're implying." "I've no reason to." "No reason?" Holmes raised an eyebrow. "Your father's death leaves you the heir to Blackthorn Hall, debts notwithstanding, and the sapphire, if found, would clear those debts. A tempting motive." Charles's face flushed, but before he could retort, Miss Eliza spoke, her voice trembling. "Mr. Holmes, I saw Charles in his room last night, through the door. He was inebriated, as he says, but I heard footsteps in the corridor later, near the study. I thought it was Clara, but now—" Clara's head snapped up, her voice a whisper. "It wasn't me, Miss Eliza. I was in the servants' quarters after Mr. Holmes sent me back." Holmes's eyes gleamed, but he said nothing, instead producing the coded note and the new papers from Clara. "These," he said, holding them up, "suggest Sir Henry feared betrayal. The initials CR appear repeatedly, linked to payments and a meeting at midnight. Does anyone care to enlighten us?" The room fell silent, the only sound the faint crackle of the fire. Grayson's eyes flickered, but he remained still. Charles stared at the floor, his hands clenched. Mrs. Adler stepped forward, her voice steady. "I knew of no CR, but Henry was secretive. He trusted few, even within the family." Holmes nodded, tucking the papers away. "Then we must look elsewhere. Watson, to Mr. Poole." We found the groundskeeper awake but groggy, propped up in bed, his weathered face drawn with pain. I checked his bandage, satisfied with his recovery, while Holmes sat beside him, his manner gentle but probing. "Mr. Poole," he began, "what did you see in the garden last night?" Poole's eyes darted to the door, then back to Holmes. I was checking the hedges, sir. I'd seen someone there before, near the study window, the night Sir Henry died. Last night I went to look again, and something hit me. I didn't see who." Holmes leaned closer. "But you saw someone before. Describe them." Poole hesitated, his voice low. "A shadow, tall, cloaked. Like Miss Eliza said, it moved fast into the fog. I thought it was the curse, but I ain't one for ghosts." Holmes's smile was faint. "Nor am I. Rest, Mr. Poole. You've been most helpful." As we left, Holmes' expression was grim. "The cloaked figure again, Watson. The same shadow Eliza saw, and now Poole. But the ash. Poole does not smoke, nor does Eliza. We must search Charles's and Grayson's quarters." With Grayson occupied and Charles out riding, we slipped into their rooms. Charles was a chaos of scattered clothes and empty bottles, but a tin of Virginia tobacco sat on his desk, its contents matching the ash from the garden. Grayson's room was Spartan, but a pipe and a small pouch of the same tobacco were tucked in a drawer. Holmes pocketed a sample from each, his eyes narrowing. 2 smokers, 1 trail. But the footprints, neither man has feet so small. Back in our room, Holmes spread the coded note and Sir Henry's papers before him, his fingers tracing the symbols. "The cipher is nearly solved," he said. "It confirms C.R. was to meet Sir Henry in the study, likely to discuss the sapphire. But the meeting ended in death. The stopped clock, the locked room, the ash, all point to a carefully laid plan." A sudden knock interrupted us. Mrs. Adler, her face pale. "Mr. Holmes, Clara's gone. She left a note saying she's fleeing to London, fearing for her life." Holmes's eyes flashed. "Then we must act swiftly, Watson. Clara's flight is either guilt or terror. Tonight we set a trap, to catch a shadow, and perhaps a murderer." The fog thickened, and the manor's creaks grew louder, as if Blackthorn Hall itself were whispering its secrets, daring us to unravel them before it was too late. The fog over Blackthorn Hall had grown so dense by evening that the manor seemed an island adrift in a sea of mist, its gabled silhouette barely discernible. The air inside was heavy with the scent of coal smoke and wax, the gas lamps casting a sickly glow that did little to dispel the gloom. I, Dr. John Watson, sat in our guest room, my nerves taut as a bowstring, while Sherlock Holmes paced, his lean frame taut with purpose. Clara's sudden flight to London, announced by Mrs. Adler's urgent message, had shifted the atmosphere of the house, as if the walls themselves sensed a reckoning. Holmes held the coded note, his eyes tracing its symbols with a feverish intensity. "The cipher is solved, Watson," he said at last, his voice low but triumphant. "It is a Polybius square with thorn as the keyword. The message reads, C.R. to meet at midnight. Study. Sapphire's location revealed." Sir Henry expected a rendezvous, but instead met his death. The stopped clock at midnight was no coincidence. It marks the moment of betrayal. I leaned forward, my mind racing. But who is C.R.? Charles, Clara, or someone else entirely? Holmes's smile was thin. "The initials are a mask, Watson. Charles is too obvious, Clara too improbable. The tobacco ash, the small footprints, the cloaked figure, these suggest a subtler hand. Tonight we shall unmask it." He outlined his plan, a trap to draw out the culprit. We would stage a scene in the study, letting it be known that Holmes had found the sapphire's hiding place. The household would be informed through Mrs. Adler, who agreed to spread the word discreetly. "The murderer will act," Holmes said, "driven by greed or fear. We shall be ready." As night fell, we positioned ourselves in the study, the room's heavy air thick with the lingering scent of gunpowder and old paper. Holmes had placed a decoy, a small velvet-lined box, similar to the one in the vault, on the desk, its lid ajar to reveal a glinting blue stone. In truth, a piece of glass from his pocket. The study door was left unlocked, the key in plain sight, and we concealed ourselves behind a heavy curtain near the fireplace, where we could see without being seen. The house grew silent, save for the distant creak of floorboards and the faint drip of water in the walls. My revolver was at hand, its weight reassuring, though I prayed I would not need it. Holmes's eyes gleamed in the dark, his breathing steady, every sense attuned to the slightest sound. At 11:30, a faint rustle came from the corridor, followed by the soft tread of footsteps. My heart pounded as the study door creaked open, revealing a figure cloaked in black, its face obscured by a hood. The figure moved to the desk, pausing at the sight of the decoy box. A gloved hand reached for it, hesitated, then lifted the lid. The faint clink of glass echoed in the stillness. "Now, Watson." Holmes sprang from the curtain, his voice a whip-crack. I followed, revolver raised, as the figure whirled, dropping the box with a clatter. The hood fell back, revealing Miss Eliza Norton, her face pale, her eyes wide with shock. "Miss Norton!" I exclaimed, lowering my weapon. "What are you doing here?" She staggered back, her hands raised. "Mr. Holmes, I didn't mean harm. I thought the sapphire was real. I needed it for Charles. He's in debt, ruined. I wanted to save him." Holmes's gaze was unrelenting. "A noble motive, perhaps, but your actions betray you. The small footprints in the garden. Your shoes match their size. The cloaked figure Poole and you described. Was that you, watching the study the night Sir Henry died?" Eliza's lips trembled. I was in the garden, yes. I saw someone near the study window, but it wasn't me who entered. I swear it. I only wanted to find the sapphire, to protect Charles." Holmes stepped closer, his voice low. "And the tobacco ash? You do not smoke, yet it was found where you stood." "I don't know about any ash," she cried. "I was there, but I didn't kill him. Please, you must believe me." Before Holmes could press further, a commotion erupted outside. A shout, followed by the sound of running feet. We rushed into the corridor, where Mrs. Adler stood, her face ashen. "It's Charles," she said. "He's in the library, drunk and raving. He says he knows who killed Henry." We found Charles slumped in a chair, a half-empty bottle of brandy at his side, his eyes wild. "It was Grayson," he slurred, pointing a shaking finger toward the butler, who had just entered. "I saw him that night near the study. He's CR. He was after the sapphire." Grayson's face remained impassive, but his hands clenched. "Nonsense, sir. I was in my quarters." "You're mistaken, or lying to save yourself." Holmes's eyes flicked between them, his mind a whirlwind of calculation. "Enough," he said. "Mr. Grayson, your pipe tobacco matches the ash in the garden. Charles, your alibi in London is unverified. And Miss Eliza, your presence in the garden implicates you. One of you, or more, knows the truth. Watson, search Grayson's quarters again. Look for anything tying him to CR." I hurried to the butler's room, my heart pounding. Amid the Spartan furnishings, I found a locked box beneath the bed. Forcing it open, I discovered a bundle of letters, signed CR, addressed to Sir Henry. They spoke of debts, threats, and a demand for the sapphire's location. My hands shook as I carried them back to Holmes. He scanned the letters, his expression grim. "CR is not Grayson, nor Charles," he said. "These letters are in a woman's hand. Watson, we have been blind. The true CR is closer than we thought." The manor creaked. The fog pressed closer, and I felt the weight of a revelation looming, as dangerous as the shadows that surrounded us. The revelation of the letters in Grayson's quarters hung over Blackthorn Hall like a storm cloud, the air in the library thick with suspicion, and the acrid scent of Charles's spilled brandy. I, Dr. John Watson, stood clutching the bundle of papers, their delicate feminine script a stark contrast to the grim accusations they contained. Sherlock Holmes paced before the fireplace, his eyes glinting with the fierce clarity that signalled he was closing in on the truth. The household, Mrs. Adler, Miss Eliza, Charles, and Grayson stood or sat in uneasy silence, their faces a gallery of fear, defiance, and guarded secrets. Holmes held up one of the letters, its edges worn as if handled often. "These," he said, his voice cutting through the tension, "are signed CR, and demand the location of the Blackthorn sapphire. They threaten Sir Henry with exposure of his debts tied to payments made to this same CR. The handwriting is unmistakably a woman's. Mrs. Adler, Miss Norton, one of you must explain." Mrs. Adler's eyes widened, her composure faltering for the first time. "Mr. Holmes, you cannot believe I am CR. I loved Henry despite our distance. I had no need for the sapphire. My own means are sufficient." Eliza's voice trembled as she spoke. "Nor I, Mr. Holmes. I sought the sapphire for Charles, not for myself. Those letters are not mine. I've never written to Sir Henry in such a manner." Holmes's gaze shifted to Grayson, who stood rigid, his face a mask. "And you, Mr. Grayson? These letters were found in your quarters. How did they come to be there?" The butler's jaw tightened. "I've never seen them before, sir. Someone must have placed them there to implicate me. I served Sir Henry faithfully for 20 years. I had no cause to threaten him." Charles snorted, his voice slurred but venomous. "Faithful? You were always skulking about, Grayson. I'd wager you wanted the sapphire for yourself, to escape this crumbling pile." Holmes raised a hand, silencing the room. "Enough. The letters are but one thread in this web. The small footprints, the tobacco ash, the stopped clock, the empty vault, all converge on a single truth. Sir Henry's death was orchestrated to conceal the theft of the sapphire. CR is the key, and I suspect they are closer than we imagine." He turned to me, his voice low. "Watson, accompany me to the study. We must re-examine the scene in light of these letters." We left the household under Mrs. Adler's watchful eye and returned to the study, its air still heavy with the faint tang of gunpowder and the musty scent of old paper. Holmes moved to the desk where the stopped clock sat, its hands frozen at midnight. He lifted it, examining the scratch on its base with his magnifying glass. "This mark," he said, "was made by a sharp tool, not a random accident. Someone stopped the clock deliberately to fix the time of death, or to mislead us." He turned to the window, its latch still secure, and knelt to inspect the floor beneath. "Here, Watson, faint traces of mud missed by Lestrade's men, the same soil as the garden, mixed with ash. Our cloaked figure stood here, inside the room, despite the locked door and latched window." I frowned, my mind grappling with the impossibility. "But how, Holmes? The key was in the lock, the window sealed. No one could have entered or left." Holmes's smile was faint but sharp. "Unless, Watson, the room was never truly locked. Observe the keyhole." He inserted the study key, turning it with a click. "The lock is functional, but the mechanism is loose, easily manipulated from the outside with a fine tool. A skilled hand could lock it after the deed, creating the illusion of a sealed room." My pulse quickened. Then the murderer was inside, killed Sir Henry, and locked the door from the corridor. "Precisely," Holmes said. "And the footprints outside were a diversion, placed to suggest an external intruder. The small shoes, likely a woman's, were chosen to mislead. But the ash betrays the true culprit, someone who smokes Virginia tobacco." We returned to the library, where the household remained, their tension palpable. Holmes held up the letters again, his voice commanding. These letters were written by CR, who met Sir Henry at midnight, likely under the pretense of revealing the sapphire's location. The meeting ended in murder, The clock stopped to obscure the true time, and the sapphire taken from the vault. But the vault was empty when we found it, suggesting CR has the gem, or knows who does. Mrs. Adler's voice was sharp. "Mr. Holmes, you speak in riddles. If you suspect me, say so plainly." Holmes's eyes met hers, unyielding. "I suspect everyone, Mrs. Adler, until the evidence clears them. Your knowledge of Sir Henry's search, your presence here, and your composure under scrutiny are remarkable. But the handwriting, compare it to your own." He produced a note Mrs. Adler had written to summon us, holding it beside the CR letters. The slant, the flourish of the letters, was strikingly similar. The room gasped, but Mrs. Adler's face hardened. "This is absurd," she said. "I wrote no such letters. Someone has forged my hand." Holmes nodded, as if expecting her denial. "Then we shall test that claim. Watson, fetch samples of everyone's handwriting, letters, notes, anything in this house." As I gathered the samples, my mind raced. Mrs. Adler as CR? It seemed impossible. Yet her poise, her familiarity with Sir Henry's affairs, made her a plausible suspect. But the small footprints, her shoes were larger, more elegant. And Clara, who had fled, could she have been CR, her flight a confession? By evening, Holmes had compared the samples, his brow furrowed. The handwriting is closest to Mrs. Adler's, but subtle differences suggest a skilled forgery. Someone studied her script, Watson, to cast suspicion on her. The true CR is playing a deeper game. As night fell, the fog thickened, and the manor's creaks grew louder, as if echoing the tightening web of deceit. Holmes sat by the fire, the letters and coded note before him, his eyes distant. "Tomorrow, Watson," he said, "we confront the shadow. The sapphire is near, and with it the murderer." The weight of his words settled over me, and I felt the manor's shadows pulse, as if Blackthorn Hall itself were drawing us deeper into its deadly maze. The fog over Blackthorn Hall had not lifted by morning, its grey veil cloaking the manor in a perpetual twilight that mirrored the unease within its walls. I, Dr. John Watson, woke to the faint creak of floorboards and the distant drip of water, sounds that had become as familiar as the scent of damp wood and coal smoke that permeated the air. Sherlock Holmes stood by the window of our guest room, his silhouette sharp against the dim light. The bundle of CR's letters and the coded notes spread before him on the table. His eyes, ever restless, gleamed with a quiet intensity, as if the puzzle of Sir Henry's murder was finally yielding to his relentless logic. "Watson," he said, his voice low, "the handwriting forgery is a masterstroke, designed to point us toward Mrs. Adler. But the small footprints, the tobacco ash, and the stopped clock tell a different story. Today, we follow the shadow's trace, literally." I frowned, still grappling with the revelations of the previous night. "You mean the cloaked figure? But Eliza admitted to being in the garden, and the handwriting—" "Is a distraction," Holmes interrupted, his tone sharp. "The forger is clever, but not infallible. The true CR is within this house, and their mistake lies in the ash. We must retrace our steps, starting with the garden." We ventured outside, the air sharp with the scent of wet earth and decaying leaves. The yew hedge near the study window was our focus, where the small footprints and tobacco ash had first drawn Holmes's attention. He knelt, his magnifying glass sweeping over the ground, now churned by recent rain, but still bearing faint impressions. "The ash is here," he said, lifting a pinch of grey powder. "Virginia tobacco, as before. But note the consistency. Fresh, not weathered. Someone returned here recently, perhaps after Poole's attack." He pointed to a new mark, half hidden by grass. A scuff, broader than the small footprints, suggesting a heavier tread. "This," he said, "is our shadow's true step. The small prints were a ruse, likely made with borrowed shoes to mislead us. The cloaked figure is no woman, but someone disguising their presence." My mind raced. Grayson, Charles, but their alibis are fragile, Holmes said, rising. Grayson claims he was in his quarters, yet his tobacco matches the ash. Charles's drunkenness is no proof of innocence. We must search their belongings again, and Clara's too. Her flight suggests complicity or fear. We returned to the manor, where the household was gathered for breakfast, their faces drawn with tension. Mrs. Adler sat composed but pale, her eyes meeting Holmes's with a mix of defiance and curiosity. Eliza's hands trembled as she sipped her tea, while Charles glowered, his cravat askew. Grayson moved silently, his expression unreadable, but I noted his hands, steady yet with a faint tremor, when Holmes's gaze lingered. "Mr. Holmes," Mrs. Adler said, breaking the silence, "have you found the sapphire? Or do you still suspect me of this? CR nonsense." Holmes's smile was faint. "The sapphire remains elusive, Mrs. Adler, but not for long. As for CR, the evidence points elsewhere. I require access to everyone's quarters, immediately." A murmur of protest rose, but Holmes's authority quelled it. We began with Grayson's room, where I had found the letters. Beneath a loose floorboard, Holmes discovered a small vial of ink, its label faded, but matching the type used in the CR letters. "Interesting," he murmured. "Grayson's denial may hold, but this ink suggests someone used his quarters to forge the letters." In Charles's room, amid the chaos of bottles and scattered clothes, Holmes found a hidden compartment in a desk drawer. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a map of the manor's east wing, with the cellar marked in red ink, echoing the X in the library book. "Charles has been searching," Holmes said, "or someone wishes us to think so." Clara's quarters, abandoned since her flight, yielded little. A few personal items, a locket with a faded photograph of a young man, perhaps a brother or lover. But beneath her mattress, Holmes found a crumpled note in Sir Henry's hand. "Keep this safe, Clara. If I fall, CR is the key." Holmes's eyes narrowed. Clara knew more than she admitted. Her flight was not guilt, but terror. She feared CR, and with reason. As we returned to the study, Holmes re-examined the stopped clock, his fingers tracing the scratch on its base. "This mark," he said, "was made by a knife, likely the same used to pry open the vault. The clock was stopped to obscure the true time of death, perhaps to protect an alibi." A sudden noise interrupted us, a sharp crack from the corridor. We rushed out to find Mr. Poole, recovered but unsteady, leaning against the wall. "Mr. Holmes," he gasped, "I remembered something. The night I was attacked, I saw a glint in the fog, metal, like a blade. It was near the study window before I was struck." Holmes's expression was grim. "A blade, you say? And the cloaked figure? Any clearer memory?" Poole shook his head. "Only the shape, tall, moving fast. I thought it was a man, but the fog." Holmes dismissed him gently, then turned to me. "Watson, the pieces are aligning. The ash, the knife, the forged letters, the map, all point to a single mind orchestrating this. Tonight we set another trap, but this time we bait it with the truth." As dusk fell, Holmes gathered the household in the drawing-room, his voice calm but commanding. "The sapphire is within this house," he said, "and so is Sir Henry's killer. Tomorrow I shall reveal all, but tonight I urge caution. The shadow moves among us. The fog thickened. The manor's creaks grew louder. and I felt the weight of Holmes's words, knowing the truth was near, and with it, danger. The fog that enveloped Blackthorn Hall seemed to pulse with a life of its own, its grey tendrils seeping through the cracks of the manor's ancient walls. I, Dr. John Watson, sat in our guest room, the air heavy with the scent of damp stone and the faint lingering trace of tobacco ash. The fire cast restless shadows, and my revolver lay within reach, its cold weight a reminder of the danger that loomed. Sherlock Holmes stood by the window, his sharp profile etched against the dim glow of a gas lamp, his fingers drumming lightly on the sill as he stared into the mist. "Watson," he said, his voice low and deliberate, "tomorrow we unmask the killer, but tonight we must be vigilant. The shadow knows we are close. Poole's attack, Clara's flight, the forged letters, all are desperate moves to deflect us. The sapphire is the key, and it is here, hidden in plain sight." I shifted uneasily, my mind replaying the clues. The small footprints, the tobacco ash, the stopped clock, the empty vault, and the letters signed CR. "Holmes," I said, "you suspect someone, don't you? Is it Mrs. Adler despite the forgery? Or Charles with his debts and evasions?" Holmes's smile was faint, almost predatory. "The evidence points to a mind both cunning and desperate, Watson. The forgery was meant to implicate Mrs. Adler, but its flaws betray the true hand. The ash, the knife, the map in Charles's room, all are threads in a tapestry, woven by one who knows this house intimately." Before I could press further, a faint sound reached us, a soft thud, like a book falling from the direction of the library. Holmes seized his lantern, its light dimmed to a sliver, and we moved silently through the darkened corridors. The manor creaked around us, the air thick with the musty scent of old paper and wax. As we neared the library, a shadow flickered across the doorway, vanishing as we approached. Inside, the room was still, save for a single book lying open on the floor, its pages marked with another red X, this time over the study. Holmes knelt, examining the book with his magnifying glass. "Fresh ink," he murmured. "Someone continues to guide us, or taunt us. The study, Watson. We return there now." We entered the study, its air still heavy with the faint tang of gunpowder and the oppressive silence of a room touched by death. Holmes moved to the desk where the stopped clock sat, its hands frozen at midnight. He lifted it, his fingers tracing the scratch on its base. "This knife mark," he said, "matches the one on the vault's lock. The same blade stopped the clock and opened the vault, likely to retrieve the sapphire after Sir Henry's death." He turned to the fireplace, his eyes narrowing. "The chimney," he said almost to himself. "The one place we haven't searched." He knelt, peering up the flue, his lantern casting light on the soot-stained bricks. After a moment, he reached in, his fingers brushing something solid. With a careful tug, he withdrew a small leather pouch, its surface dusted with soot. Inside was a deep blue gem, its facets catching the light like a captured star. The Blackthorn sapphire. I gasped, but Holmes's expression was grim. "The sapphire was hidden here, Watson, where no one would think to look. The killer took it from the vault, killed Sir Henry, and concealed it to retrieve later. But they miscalculated, leaving the ash, the forged letters, and now this." A sudden noise, a sharp intake of breath, came from the doorway. We turned to see Mrs. Adler, her face pale, her eyes fixed on the sapphire. "You found it," she whispered. "Then it's over?" "Not yet," Holmes said, his voice cold. "The sapphire is bait, Mrs. Adler, and you are here at an hour when most are abed. Explain." Her hands clenched, but her voice was steady. "I couldn't sleep. I heard you leave your room and followed, fearing you'd found something dangerous. I am no killer, Mr. Holmes. Holmes's eyes bored into hers. Perhaps. But the letters in your hand, the knowledge of Sir Henry's search, you are entwined in this, willingly or not. Return to your room. Tomorrow all will be revealed. As she left, I turned to Holmes, my voice low. Do you believe her? She speaks truth, but not all of it, he replied. The sapphire's discovery will force the killer's hand. We must prepare for tomorrow's gathering, Watson. Every clue, the ash, the footprints, the letters, the knife, points to one person. The shadow will not escape. We returned to our room, the sapphire secured in Holmes's pocket. He sat by the fire, re-examining the CR letters and the coded note, his fingers tracing the forged script. The forger studied Mrs. Adler's hand closely, he said, but the flourish on the R is too sharp, a habit of one trained in formal correspondence. And the ash, Virginia tobacco, smoked by few in this house. The pieces are in place. As the night deepened, the manor's creaks grew louder, the fog pressing against the windows like a silent conspirator. I sat with my revolver, my eyes on the door, knowing that tomorrow's confrontation would unravel the deadly game or draw us deeper into its snare. The fog that had cloaked Blackthorn Hall for days seemed to lift slightly as the morning of our final day dawned, as if the manor itself sensed the unravelling of its secrets. I, Dr. John Watson, stood in the drawing-room, where the household had gathered at Sherlock Holmes's summons. The air was thick with the scent of coal smoke and polished wood, the gas lamps casting a pale glow over the tense faces before us. Mrs. Irene Adler, her composure strained. Miss Eliza Norton, her hands clasped tightly. Charles Norton, his eyes bloodshot and defiant. Mr. Grayson, the butler, rigid as ever. And Mr. Poole, recovered but wary, his bandaged head a silent testament to the violence that had marked this case. Clara, the maid, remained absent, her flight to London an unanswered question. Holmes stood by the fireplace, the Blackthorn sapphire in his hand, its deep blue facets catching the light like a frozen flame. The room's silence was absolute, broken only by the faint creak of the manor's ancient beams. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice clear and commanding, "Sir Henry Norton's death was no suicide, but a murder meticulously planned to conceal the theft of this sapphire. Today I shall reveal the killer and the web of deceit they wove." Charles shifted uneasily, his voice sharp. "Get on with it, Holmes. I've had enough of your theatrics." Holmes's smile was thin. "Patience, Mr. Norton. The truth requires precision. Let us begin with the evidence. A locked study, a stopped clock, small footprints, tobacco ash, a coded note, forged letters signed CR, and an empty vault. Each clue points to a single mind, one present in this room." He held up the coded note. This message, written in a polybious square with thorn as the keyword, arranged a midnight meeting with CR to reveal the sapphire's location. Sir Henry expected an ally but found a killer. The clock, stopped at midnight with a knife's scratch, was meant to fix the time of death, suggesting suicide. But the lock on the study door was manipulated from the outside with a fine tool, allowing the killer to exit and lock it, creating the illusion of a sealed room. Mrs. Adler's eyes narrowed. "You suspect me, Mr. Holmes, because of the letters. I've told you they are forged." Holmes nodded. "Indeed, Mrs. Adler. The letters found in Mr. Grayson's quarters mimic your hand, but betray subtle flaws. A too-sharp flourish on the R, a sign of formal training. They were placed to implicate you, but their true author is another." He turned to the fireplace, where the sapphire had been hidden. The sapphire was taken from the thorned vault, killed for and concealed in the chimney, where only someone familiar with the house's secrets would think to hide it. The small footprints in the garden, made with a woman's shoe, were a ruse designed to mislead. The true prints, broader and scuffed, were partially obscured, but they carried Virginia tobacco ash, a gentleman's blend. Grayson stiffened, his voice low. "My tobacco is no secret, sir. Half the house smokes it." "True," Holmes said, "but only one of you was in the garden watching the study the night Sir Henry died. Mr. Poole saw a cloaked figure, as did Miss Eliza. And Mr. Poole's attack, marked by the same ash, was meant to silence his suspicions." Eliza's voice trembled. "I admitted to being in the garden, Mr. Holmes, but I didn't kill him. I only wanted the sapphire for Charles." Holmes's gaze softened, but only briefly. "Your honesty clears you, Miss Norton, but not entirely. Your presence in the garden was noted by the true killer, who used it to their advantage." He turned to Charles, whose face was pale. "Mr. Norton, your debts and quarrels with your father made you a suspect, but your drunkenness that night is corroborated. The map in your room, marked with a red X, was planted to cast suspicion, much like the letters in Grayson's quarters." Holmes paused, his eyes sweeping the room, then fixed on Grayson. "Which brings us to you, Mr. Grayson, or should I say Cedric Rutherford, C.R. Your formal training as a butler included penmanship, precise enough to forge Mrs. Adler's hand. Your pipe, filled with Virginia tobacco, left ash in the garden and near Poole's attack. You knew the house's secrets, including the thorned vault and the chimney's hiding place. You met Sir Henry at midnight, under the guise of revealing the sapphire's location. When he refused to yield it, you shot him, stopped the clock to obscure the time, and locked the door from the outside with a tool you kept hidden." Grayson's face remained impassive, but his hands clenched. "Preposterous! You've no proof." Holmes produced a small knife from his pocket, its blade etched with a faint thorned crest. "This was found in your quarters, hidden in a false drawer. Its edge matches the scratch on the clock and the vault's lock. And Clara, your accomplice, coerced by threats or promises, fled when she feared exposure. Her note to Sir Henry confirms your role as C.R." The room erupted in gasps, but Grayson's composure cracked, his eyes darting to the door. Before he could move, I stepped forward, revolver in hand. "Stay where you are," I said, my voice steady. Holmes continued, unrelenting. "You planted the small shoes to suggest a woman's involvement, forged the letters to frame Mrs. Adler, and attacked Poole when he grew too curious. The sapphire was your prize, but you hid it, waiting for the suspicion to clear. Your mistake was the ash, Grayson. It betrayed you at every turn." Grayson's shoulders sagged, his voice a low growl. "Sir Henry was a fool obsessed with that gem. He'd have ruined us all. I deserved it. 20 years of service and nothing but scraps." Holmes's eyes were cold. "You deserve justice, and you shall have it. Watson, summon Lestrade." As I left to fetch the inspector, the manor's shadows seemed to retreat, the fog lifting as if Blackthorn Hall itself exhaled. The sapphire gleamed in Holmes's hand, its curse debunked, its secrets laid bare. The killer was unmasked, but I could not shake the chill of how close we had come to missing the truth, lost in the fog of deceit.